Texas. I'm glad Dave didn't use it in the party pictures from the sabbatical year in Monterey. I'm glad to see you all here today. I've got a serious message, but I hope we can be lighthearted about it. My name tag now reads Gerald Brown since last Tuesday in California. That's my only opening joke. I'm here to talk about risk assessment and risk management for Homeland Security and Defense. Before 9/11, those of us at the Naval Postgraduate School played our preferred role, which is offense. Since 9/11 and the changes in public law, we're now permitted to play defense. I still prefer offense, but defense is an important issue. What I want to show you this afternoon is what we think is a little different about Homeland Defense. And there's no mathematics because we had Ed Kaplan doing the operations research and intelligence. We have Matt Carlisle talking about tri-level optimization. I'm a modeling agnostic when it comes to modeling Homeland Defense as long as the model paradigms are set correctly. We also had, we had John Burge, another colleague of mine, talking about risk analysis just a few hours ago. So they've well covered the territory. What I want to talk about today is setting the stage about how to think about this problem and perhaps how to break loose from paradigms that we've adopted since 9/11 that are not constructive thinking about this problem. Let me try to explain what I mean. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge my NPS colleagues. We have quite a large group studying Homeland Defense. Any one of those people could have made this presentation today. That's how seriously we take this issue. I lost with a short straw. A lot of non-NPS colleagues at this conference have done some serious work, and we're looking for more and more competition. We'd like more and more of you to join us in this very important endeavor in operations research. We've been blessed with hundreds of uniformed Naval Postgraduate School students. Every Tuesday we have a uniform day. The students have to wear their military uniforms, and I try to wear a tie. And you walk into class, and you say, where do we find people like this? This is so stunningly impressive. And we're really blessed to have had those people helping us. We've also had ongoing research support from people who are willing to trust us to go out and find important problems, work on them, solve them, and report back afterwards. It gives us the ability to jump on an emergent problem while it's still emergent. So let's look around as citizens. What's happened since 9/11? We're citizens in ORs today. How has your community or your home changed? What are the substantive things that have happened to make you feel better and safer? You have offset fencing at work, employee ID, access controls, traffic controls. You have backup data systems. For your corporate sites, you have a director of corporate continuity or some equivalent executive that wasn't there before. Are your local first responders better trained and equipped than they were before? Is there public understanding and awareness that wasn't there before? All serious questions. Let me ask, I'll just take you on a short tour. This is our facility. That fencing is new. That access control is new. Those are new. That's new. That's new. So we're safer, aren't we? That's Hercules Dave Augustin sitting over in the third row. So in some cases there's less there than meets the eye. And we certainly hope, it's been published in literature, we certainly hope to deter stupid terrorists, or timid ones. But the smart, aggressive ones, the ones that do their homework and have intelligence and invest carefully, we're still quite vulnerable. And there's a lot of serious work that has to be done. So again, what's happened since 9/11? Well, look around the country. What's new? Are the national responders better trained and equipped? We now have Northern Command take over if local agencies get overwhelmed. Is public understanding and awareness better? I don't know. Where is this infrastructure and how does it influence you and your life? You know, can you put your hand in, look around you, do you know what infrastructure we're talking about? Here's some. See the offset fencing there? That's a petrochemical. National Petroleum Reserve. No fencing. Oh, there's Sparky Kevin Wood over there. He's our electrical genius. He has made us agree that perhaps the electric grid is one of the most worrisome infrastructures that we have to concern ourselves with. We've lost the Bay Bridge now twice in recent years. So, most important, is there a general sense among the U.S. population that another attack is possible? been some recent essays in the Wall Street Journal, for instance, by Peggy Noonan claiming no. People are in denial. They just forgot about it. They don't like bad news. This can't happen to us. If we don't think about it, it's not going to happen. Well, if you read, for instance, the Grand Town Report, World Risk, declaring there's a better than even chance, in their view, of a bioterror attack against this country in the next decade. It's a pretty serious declaration. And Greg Parnell here and I served an NRC committee on bioterror, for which the consequences are so grave that I stopped worrying about loose news. So now let's start the presentation, if you don't mind. I'd like to build a fabric, a structure here, with which we can use to study this problem. And I hope it leads you to change your ideas about some of the early literature that's been published since 9/11 about terrorism and defense of infrastructure against terrorists. So this is all about systems and supporting our quality of life in our society. And what we have are human systems, social organizational systems, we have economic informational systems, we have political systems. Those are what we view as being at risk, certainly. Those have a personality, those have a presence that we care about in the heart. We also have these critical infrastructures. Now, I'm not listed in the same way that they're officially published, but we have information communication systems, we certainly have energy systems, transport systems, and so forth. Some of these systems we found to be extremely fragile. Some of these systems we have found to be remarkably robust. But the only way we've found out which ones are fragile and which ones are robust is a lot of work. It's not obvious at first glance, frequently, which ones are which. Some are fairly easy to make, to defend. Some are fairly easy to make better, in some sense we'll define. Some aren't, some are very costly. So what if something bad happens? What can happen bad? Well, we have lots of non-deliberate events. I live in California. So we have lots of non-deliberate things. We worry about tsunamis. We worry about earthquakes. We can have engineering failures. We can have access to all kinds. We can also have what worries us more, which are these deliberate events, vandalism, sabotage, and particular terrorism. Any of these initiating events can have a bad influence on these entities we've listed here in the center. With our human systems, we certainly worry about deaths and suffering and damage. With our critical infrastructure systems, we worry about what? We worry about, are they still going to work for us? Will I still have water to put a fire out with? Will I still have electricity in my hospital? Will I have physical damage so bad that I can no longer convey myself across the Bay Bridge or the Barton Tunnel? Now, at this juncture, you might begin to think about the costs of these things. Critical infrastructure, some of them are quite costly, enormously costly. Some not so much so. Should we consider the costs as ours in our concerns about the infrastructure? Perhaps. What happens when we lose function and suffer physical damage? The consequences are obvious. They're not obvious. There are many cascading events that can occur. There are cross-infrastructure events that can occur. But what we really know is that if these infrastructure systems suffer loss of function or physical damage, that the implications of this that we care about, the consequences we care about, are those on the thing we care about in our heart and love, which are our citizens, the people we are responsible for. Now, the National Strategy for Homeland Security is a little cluttered. I'll leave this up here for a few minutes. It's beautifully crafted. Whoever wrote this for the White House knows how to write and think. It's crafted in complete paragraphs with complete ideas, and when you read it, you see these folks, these policy people really capture the essence of the problem. And the essence here that I want to stress for you is this idea of operational resilience. We can't stop the attacks realistically. There's just too much to defend. We will suffer attacks. We will suffer damage. What we should be doing is preparing for that and guarding and girding against infrastructure that is unrealistically fragile in the sense that we don't have resilience. And we'll define resilience for the system as a whole as the ability to continue functioning even after it's suffered damage. I'm not in the business today of talking about preventing an attack. That was Ed Kaplan's issue. I'm not trying to catch the bad guy. Getting confused by these other issues, which are very important and are not my problem today, will not make me a better person to solve the infrastructure problem. I'm worried about defending infrastructure, and I'm not trying to catch anybody, and I can't predict Zach. In fact, I assume there will be one. So key features of our infrastructure. 85% of infrastructure doesn't belong to the government. Stunning statistic for some people. The government has no business telling these infrastructure operators what to do. It's not their property. They've always had to contend with disruptions, and in some industries they're very good at contending with disruptions. Some industries are used to disruptions. The electrical grid is operated very intelligently with some very sophisticated optimization models, solved many times per second. Other infrastructure operators may not be so sophisticated, but they're used to suffering casualties. They're used to suffering even intelligent adversarial casualties, as labor unions have been known to do, or international longshoring. Our infrastructure was built, however, before 9/11 by and large, before we really worried about terrorists. And in fact, because the malicious acts were not a concern at that time, it was not built with an intent to be resilient. It was built with an intent to be efficient. In fact, we in this room are probably more guilty than any other professional society at making U.S. infrastructure efficient and fragile. Someone in this room probably had a hand in inventing just-in-time. Paragon fragility. These infrastructures are not isolated components. These infrastructures are not transformers or water pumps or gasoline tanks. They are systems. These systems act together and support or interfere with one another to perform some function. The question that we ask here, the appropriate question is, when one part of the system can affect what happens somewhere else, often non-intuitive ways, how do we account for that? We need to understand, this has been the bulk of the work we've been doing at Monterey, we need to understand what will happen to a particular component, or more particularly a set of components. A set of components that I might not be able to choose. Bad lunch. A set of components that might be chosen by an adversary. Now, in some industries, actually, industry standards dictate that you should be prepared for any single component to fail, or a pair of components. But few industries go beyond that, and we've done red teaming with our students and convinced ourselves that with a small number of people and limited resources, we can destroy quite a large number of components that are unprotected, and we get to choose that set of components, and no one studied that before. We have no idea what's going to happen in the California electric grid if I take out 5 substations. Well, we do now in Monterey, we didn't before. Or if I take out 3 pumps at once from the California water project. And how long will it be before Los Angeles gets thirsty? So we worry about system response, not individual components. We worry about consequences in ways we can measure, not individual components. And understanding these critical infrastructures means understanding the decisions that we have to make. What's within our purview? What do we control? Let's don't obsess about what we don't control, but what we do. I can't control the terrorist decisions. I may be able to influence them, but I can't control them. I do control my decisions, and I hope to influence the decisions of the policymakers that I have some credibility with. So we need to know how to operate these systems. We need to learn this as ORs. Not as people want, as ORs, in order to study infrastructure resilience, we need to know ourselves how to operate these systems under normal conditions and in the presence of any imaginable disruption. Frequently, these models do not exist before we arrive, so they have to be built from a clean sheet of paper. In all the infrastructures we've studied so far, these models can be constructed and solved and shown to behave in intelligent ways, and shown to the system operators who in some cases say, yeah, that's not unlike what I would do. They haven't considered this. So we have to use these models to identify those components, those pieces, those parts of the infrastructure, not individual components, but sets of components, and decide which of these are important. Which of these are important enough that I should worry about their simultaneous loss or damage or impairment. So we're trying to guess now what an adversary would be interested in attacking. We're trying to guess now where we should invest our limited resources. This infrastructure is vast. We're going to be able to make only certain focused investments. The good news I have for you is that some of these infrastructures don't need a lot of investment to get a lot of initial gain. Further good news is as you make more and more of these investments, these gains tend to make you more and more resilient. And I think my colleague Dave Olson calls this the rising tide that floats all boats. Pretty soon we begin to look like such a bad target that we hope people decide to go attack somebody else. So we're interested in building in redundancy. We're interested in hardening the targets, if we can create such defenses, and we're interested in capacity expansion. Not capacity expansion for economic reasons, capacity expansion in order to be resilient. Operations research knows all about decision making. Here comes the message for you folks. We're really good at that. Operations research is really good at building operational systems. In fact, ORs built the operating models that are used by a lot of people with supply chains, electric grids, and water grids, natural gas pipelines, petroleum pipelines. Who to attack? Well, come see us in military OR. Military OR has been on the far side of the Potomac River from downtown D.C. for a long time, and would modestly claim to have had a lot of experience planning how to choose targets and how to do attacks. In fact, I much prefer that you guys take this part of this over and let me go back and play offense some more. Where to invest? Well, we're very good at this. This is all our domain. So where has OR been since 9/11? I gave you a list of people on the first slide who had influence on policy, who've done a lot of work. I know a lot of people doing smaller amounts of work, but these are the significant contributors that we would think of if we were going to form a new National Research Council committee to set us an issue on this topic. This is the short list. Where's OR been? And OR should be cautioned because efficiency and profits here tend to be at odds with resilience. What I'd like to do is give you a case study, some entertainment, a little history lesson. I'm from the Navy. I'm here to proselytize. So what I'd like to do is give you two examples from World War II military planning, or well-known examples. But give you these examples stated as an OR who worries about this issue of infrastructure, resilience, decision-making, and how to deal with characterizing behavior of terrorists. Okay? Look at the Battle of Midway and the Battle of Bismarck Sea. The Battle of Midway is quite well known. Turning point of World War II, greatest naval battle, some say in history. Bismarck Sea, less known, but an important example. This is a depiction of the Battle of Midway. The red tracks at the left are the Japanese carrier forces approaching the Mid-Pacific. On the right are the dispositional forces of Admiral Chester Nimitz. The background here is rather unique. Before the Battle of Midway, in early 1942, the United States was fortunate to break the Japanese Admiralty Code. We were reading messages to Japanese admirals from the Japanese Imperial Command before they got them. We did some intel work in the Pacific. We did some probing to test to see if we actually had the Admiralty Code and weren't being spoofed. The results of this are well documented. We had the code. We had message traffic that said it was virtually certain the Japanese would attack Midway Island. This is called knowledge of enemy intent. This is what Ed Kaplan would have called intelligence OR. It doesn't get any better than this in warfare. Chester Nimitz disposed U.S. forces to protect Midway, as well as Hawaii, not a declared target. This put him at some disadvantage in engaging a vastly superior Japanese force. Yet, he argued successfully against his superiors in the Pentagon to do this, and prevailed. He planned for enemy capabilities and not enemy intentions. Enemy intentions, or enemy intent, is the analog in the military of probabilistic risk analysis in the civilian world. Trying to guess the probability that enemy's going to attack A or B. He knew that they were capable of attacking Hawaii, which had largely been stripped of its defensive resources, and decided because of their capability he should defend Hawaii as well as Midway. Well, the result was a great naval battle, unfortunately a victory. Now we'll look at the Battle of Bismarck Sea, less well known. This is not familiar geography for too many of you. If your vision is good, you'll see on the northeast side of New Britain. There's a city there. And on the south, or the eastern side of New Guinea, is a city of Leyden. The Japanese were in a situation where they had to transport large numbers of troops by military ship transports from the northeast down to New Guinea. We had advanced intelligence. We knew for a fact this had to happen. Over a relatively short period of time, we knew there was going to be a massive Japanese transport of troops from point A to point B. We also knew a weather forecast north of the island, the New Britain island. The weather was very bad. And we were interested in capturing, we were interested in locating these ships and attacking them from the air with a very, very small air fleet based on New Guinea, answering to General Kennedy. So here's what we have here. Of course, everybody got it said, oh, why did we say so? Right out of the textbook. We have a payoff matrix, right? A two-person zero-sum game it might be. If the convoy sails north and the Allies searches north, we only had enough assets to search on one side of the island or the other. Very few aircraft, very little fuel. We will discover the Japanese, be able to bomb them, and achieve 2 days of damage. 2 days of uninterrupted bombing against the Japanese during transit. Similarly, you see the other payoffs. If the Allies searches north, the convoy sails south, we get 2 days, and so forth. This is a room full of ORs. In a room full of non-ORs, it'll take me 5 more minutes, and people begin to guess how to analyze this and what to do. The Japanese want to minimize the number of days they're exposed. The Allies want to maximize the number of days that the Japanese are exposed. The Allies get to choose a row. The Japanese get to choose a column. And from here, of course, it's a short trip. Search simultaneously, if we could maintain secrecy about where we're searching, and if the Japanese can maintain secrecy about where they're sailing, then we have simultaneous play. And it makes sense for the Allies to choose searching to the north and maximize the minimum number of days we get to bomb. And the Japanese will also minimize their maximum losses. And in fact, this is what happened. We did discover the Japanese. We did bomb them. To give you an idea here, the losses to the Japanese were 2,500 casualties per day of bombing. It's a serious loss matrix. Let's modify things a bit. Let's change the weather a bit. The weather now on the north of the island is really bad. It's skunky weather. So, I'm sorry, the weather to the northeast of the island is very skunky. If I change this, I get what's called a mixed strategy. Everybody in this audience is aware of that. We don't get any pure strategies. We get a situation where if we both have to choose simultaneously, we really got to roll dice to improve our outcomes. But even with these mixed strategies, these can result in better expected outcomes. The result is 2.6 expected days. Okay? Notice here that the probabilities, midpoint, the probabilities are an output of analysis. We did not ask the subject matter expert to give us probabilities as an input to analysis. We did not ask someone to guess what the enemy would do. We used meteorological assessments and planning of what we call today blue and red cells, search theory, best intelligence we had to make these assessments, and we used the mathematics to deduce from that what the probability should be. The assumptions are clear. The commanders can see this. They can question this. The probabilities came from mathematics. Now, if the Japanese know in advance, because they have intelligence, suppose they have guerrillas on the ground, they see us taking off and they see us fly north and radio that back. This now becomes a sequential play game. They know our actions before they launch their transports. With sequential play, advantage Japanese, they reduce their exposure to 2 days by responding to this advanced intelligence. Notice how valuable this is to a military planner. We had a previous result of simultaneous play at 2.6 days. If we reveal by carelessness or intelligence use or by an intelligence success on their part where we're going to search ahead of time, that changes to 2.6 days. That value, that difference, that advantage is either interpretable as an advantage to us if we maintain secrecy, or an advantage to the Japanese if they have effective intelligence. These are important numbers to assess in the United States in defending our critical infrastructure. I'll try to explain why. On the other side of the Potomac from Washington, D.C., military planning is done according to something called defense planning guidance. This is the holy grail. This is the scripts. And in defense planning guidance, we always are told to assess the enemy's capability and the enemy's intent. But in my experience, unless we have a very short time horizon and very good intelligence, we never commit to intent. We never commit to PRA. Mixed strategies for an opponent make a lot of sense. We're able to assess military outcomes, we're able to assess vulnerabilities, we're able to assess our ability to search, detect, and act. But to me, these probabilities only make sense if we derive them as an output to mathematical analysis rather than ask people to guess what these probabilities are. I've never seen such an exercise, and I've seen several of these in which probabilities of competing experts agreed, or the probabilities of the same experts in repeated experiments with the same conditions agreed. That's not science. That's not operational research. World War II, things were very different. World War II, we could maintain secrecy fairly successfully. The op-tempo was very high. We were in a known worldwide death hold situation. Very quick op-tempo, short time horizons, quick actions, quick decisions. We worked very hard to maintain information advantages, but secrecy by and large was maintainable at that time. In modern infrastructure defense, things are very different. We have a lot of attackers, not just one or two. The attacker has a whole host of objectives countrywide. Time horizons are long. Intelligence is very weak, despite what Ed Kaplan would have to the contrary. We're working on it. Attackers have asymmetric information. The best intelligence document I know of for defending critical infrastructure to an attacker is the Wall Street Journal. These are billion-dollar decisions. They are debated publicly. We have sunshine laws. It's virtually impossible to make a major commitment to defending infrastructure without it having known our own population as well as everybody else. That's a game changer. So our principles of infrastructure defense, these paradigms I'm saying we should follow. We cannot assume secrecy. There's ample evidence since 9/11. We just can't assume secrecy. If we make defensive preparations, we were looking, for instance, at Bay Bridge at one point. We put 4 companies of National Guard and a detachment of patrol boats out there. You can see that on webcams all over the city. You can't hide that. We feel this is a sequential play game, in particular because we can't maintain secrecy. We have to give that up. It's very difficult and costly in a free society to maintain substantive security about what you're preparing to defend against. If we do suffer damage, we have very skilled system operators who we assume will behave to intelligently respond to that damage and maximize the function of the surviving system for whatever length of time the damage persists. We've done some work on studying that length of time. Some damages to things that are very easy to repair, some damages to infrastructure that we only get from overseas. It takes 6 months. We're concerned about that. Spares of that variety, the latter variety, are of great value. The value of surviving infrastructure derives from sustained function, not its economic replacement cost. It's a real shock, and I'm going to get in a fight with economists over this. If the Golden Gate Bridge drops tomorrow, whether you can make an economic argument or not that it's worth rebuilding it, do you believe we're not going to rebuild it? If infrastructure is critical, if we've used the term critical for infrastructure, does anybody ask what the cost of that is before we start to rebuild it? Cases I've seen in California, the answer is no. In fact, the answer in California has been rebuild as quickly as you can, privatize, put in an incentive clause. Oh, by the way, what's it going to cost? We need Bay Bridge back. So deciding what's critically important is not a matter of accounting. It's not a matter of saying that this is worth more than that, and this costs more than that. It's a question of what happened to the system? How much degradation was there? What is the value of that degradation? If I care about hard sell for some people. My job is infrastructure, not catch the bad guy. I don't care what he cares about. I don't care about what I care about. So I don't have to wring my hands and worry about what he might do, or what he might care about, or what the Quran says, or what the Al-Qaeda training manual says. I should not care about that. What I care about is what I care about, and my policymakers care about, and my citizenry, my society cares about. That's what I have to defend. We're worried about any disruption, not a likely disruption. We necessarily consider the worst case ones. And the worst case ones aren't obvious. We have to work to discover those. And sometimes it's shocking what these worst cases are and how easy they are to achieve. And sometimes it's reassuring how robust this infrastructure can be and how hard it will be to do serious damage. And no, I'm not about to tell you which is which. Find out for yourself. These investments are not going to happen overnight. They're huge capital investments. Over many, many years, who can guess what the enemy's going to do? These are decisions we're inserting on the part of the enemy. Okay, so there's been this debate. There's been some NRC reports, some open literature and so forth about risk analysis versus game theory. And as I say, I'm agnostic. Any model will work for me as long as you're thinking clearly about it, expressing what you're doing in ways I can understand and accept. So we have non-deliberate hazards and deliberate threats. Mother Nature, rolling dice, terrorists. We have assessing what is likely, otherwise known as probability risk assessment. There's classical risk analysis, which I have no problem with. Actuaries have been around for centuries. We have a lot of statistics on volcano eruptions and earthquakes and fires and other natural hazards. Probabilistic risk analysis makes perfect sense there. Here we have the classic TDC models you may have seen in the literature recently. That's the probability that a terrorist will choose to attack, the vulnerability of the target given that he attacks, and the consequences of a target, typically a component, if he does make the attack. Some function of that. That's intent-based analysis, and I have a lot of trouble with that down in deliberate threats. The other column here, we have the worst case. That's the kind of stuff that we've been doing. Worst case, there's capability-based analysis, at least in the Department of Defense. Game theory, for instance, although it's not limited to that. Worst case works both long-term and short-term. Maybe not too well there, it can be too conservative. We're doing worst case against natural disasters, it can be too conservative. But I must note, if you make your system more resilient with respect to terrorists, Mother Nature has a much harder time getting after you. There are good collateral outcomes from that. So we're working on the lower right, and I don't mind about my cohorts that are working on the upper left. I worry a lot about the off diagonal. And there's unfortunately a lot of work going on in the off diagonal. But I think we can settle this today. We can come to an agreement. Again, the problems with TDC, I'm not going to go into those today. Those are well documented. These are related numbers. You can't choose just T because T is a function. The problem with the terrorist takes an action depends on how vulnerable you are. So if you change D, that changes T. And if you're more vulnerable to a consequence on one day than another, then that changes everything. So this ends up being kind of a circle I'm glad I'm not involved in. If you'd like to see more about this, some very simple examples. Tony Cox in 2008 just wrote a devastating article about this with some very simple counterexamples. And this is the counter-argument we've heard. Well, you can't do that. What can you do? Well, what can we do in operations research? Let's start by assessing these critical infrastructures in isolation. Doing systems modeling, modeling system function, assessing degradation and loss of components, typically by what we call an operator's model. We do a lot of red teaming. That's where we use our military officer students. We give them an Al-Qaeda training manual, give them some limited resources, tell them to come back with a clever way of attacking something. They're a little hard to be clever. And they love doing it. We then do blue teaming to see if we have some viable way of criticizing that as being not a realistic attack plan. What would we do if this happened? How do we respond? We connect these individual infrastructures together, although this is the most recent research, connecting infrastructures together, showing what happens with the loss of power to other infrastructures, for instance. and look at full spectrum threats, all the cascades. We're not looking at compounds, we're looking at sets of compounds. Every one of our master's students, of which there are a number here today, I'm pleased to say, for the last 8 years has had to build one of these sets of models, studied infrastructure, plan an attack, plan a defense, and in fact, by flip of the coin, in many cases, decide at the last minute which side they're going to breach, whether they attack or defend. Just keep them on their toes. This is not a new idea at all. This has been around a long time. Oops. This was originally done for the Soviet Union in 1955. This was the cut set we targeted with nuclear weapons to keep the Soviets from using their rail system to get armor into Western Europe. There's some detail lost here. The Soviets were rather paranoid, and all those rail lines are of different gauges. They didn't want us using our rail cars to go after that. But that was the original cut set. Many people in operations research did not know until recently that some of the early work in network theory was done for the RAND Corporation, for the Air Force. A lot of the early work, a lot of classic theorems were developed for the United States military. That's an easy problem, by the way. It's easy because it's complete interdiction. Complete interdictions are fairly easy. If you now ask me, what if you only needed 2 rail links, which 2 do the most work? That's a harder problem. So we know how to solve that problem now. Okay, this involves more than DHS and DoD. This involves OR. And I'm disappointed to see so little and so late coming from OR. So here comes the advertisement. What should we be doing? Come to grips with the fact that modeling criticality, modeling resilience has to do with how the system functions, not the value of a component and not the loss of a single component. It's really, in some cases, a very weak function of the loss of a particular component. Assess what's critically important to the system as an output, not a required input. Model enemy capability instead of intent. We need to start thinking in those terms. DoD does think in those terms. The enemy's not as uncertain as you are. He's making a decision. You're assessing the probability, he's making a choice. Very good. Or professionals in the private sector. What can you do? What is the real resilience of your organization? The few private sector people that I've worked with, it's pretty shocking. They got backup data systems, they got a director of corporate continuity, they may have a little insurance, not much more. Not much has been done. If they are responsible for infrastructure, do they know how to operate it? Are they comfortable with operating it in the sense of having damage to it? Malicious damage to it. What other infrastructures do they depend upon? And do they have any relationship strategically with those operators, those infrastructures? I've found many cases in which the answer is not. If you have a director of corporate continuity or its equivalent, don't be afraid to contact that person. These are the people that are saying, what else can I do? These are the people to talk to within your corporation. The easiest case is probably supply chains, and probably the best understood and the best studied. We have some off-the-shelf tools that can quickly assess supply chains. And we have discovered that civilian supply chains that a very small investment can buy a lot of resilience. A very small investment and a little bit of extra capacity in exactly the right place, and you are extremely resilient against things like labor interruptions. Your truckers go out, or the longshoremen, or natural disasters. Good ideas should be accepted by senior management. What can OR do? Not just the private sector. The key thing here is local, state, and federal agencies, policy makers, the people that sign the checks. And they're not hearing our messaging. We understand the moral hazard of terrorist risks insurance. Have you heard of that before? It was passed soon after 9/11 by Congress. It was well-intentioned. It holds private sector companies, it indemnifies them against terrorist attacks. The idea was to temporarily protect American industry until they could sort out with the Lloyd's of London how to build new insurance policy that didn't have terrorist exclusions. Well, Congress, in its infinite wisdom, has extended this twice now through 2014. The moral hazard is, why would private sector spend money on non-economic ends to protect themselves? And Congress has said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. It's the law of unintended consequences. Again, state, local, and federal policymakers. We immediately there are a lot of expensive things that the federal government could afford to do that they can't do because they'd be buying stuff and giving it to private sector companies. I can give radios to policemen. I can buy side-scanning sonar police boats for the Hudson River, but I can't give them to Procter & Gamble. Some of these investments of hardening of critical infrastructure of great importance to the country are very, very expensive. The federal government could justify them. The private sector, maybe not so much against stockholders, residual equity. We're not allowed to do that. As a country, uniquely among several countries that have done very well with this, including Israel, we can't do that. Some regulated industries do not allow collaboration to pool critical spares. Since we started this work, we have made some success in the telecom industry and the electrical industry, and there has been some relief, regulatory relief, in which some really very, very reliable, we're talking about MTBF 1,000-year spares, very expensive things you don't expect to lose for any very bad reasons, can be stockpiled and shared. They've been given some relief, but a lot more have actually been done, in my opinion. And the OR people are the ones that would have the influence, the model, and the arguments to make to justify this. Academics, use your university's connections. You may not think so in an OR department, or I'm sorry, I'm in the last OR department on the planet. In an industrial engineering department or a systems engineering department, or all the other acronyms we use for operations research, your university is very well connected at the state, local, and federal level. Very well connected. Use those connections. As ORs, we frequently don't do that. Get introductions. Reach out to local and state authorities. We've done a limited amount of this for the Naval Postgraduate School, and virtually everybody we contact has just grabbed us into their offices and changed the locks. They're so desperate for help. We seem to be a breath of fresh air because it's not hopeless. There are things you can do. Volunteer to participate in exercises. All states run these exercises. These are minute drills, simulations of disasters of airports and so forth. Get engaged in one or two of those. Get your students engaged in one or two of those. They're very instructive. Offer your expertise. You will be embraced. Get your students involved, please. More particularly, this is really, really important part of operations research, and it should be a standard part of your curriculum. Until recently, I think you're the only curriculum on the planet that not only has a standard part, it's the center of our core. Get involved. There are sponsors, but you may have to do a little work unsponsored before you get a sponsor. That's certainly been our experience. Breaking with tradition, I read these meeting outlines. And the meeting theme here that you may have guessed is energizing the future. So I hope that you will allow me some latitude that I've reinterpreted this to be protecting our future. I want to thank you for your attention, but also, even though I don't have permission to do this, if you are interested, I have an advertisement to run here during questions, which is for our next subject conference on the defending infrastructure in Washington, D.C. You've been very attentive, nodding your heads, and very polite, and no one's thrown anything at me, so I'd like to open this up to any questions you have. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming today.